Okay, in this tutorial, I'm going to introduce you to a concept in JavaScript known as block scope, and essentially we're going to talk about global and local variables. So what we're going to do in this tutorial is create a global variable, and we're going to create a local variable, and this will be important to understand when we start looking at functions in the next chapter. So essentially, a global variable is a variable that is declared in the root of the document, and it is essentially accessible. We can access that variable anywhere within our document or our script file. So let me show you an example of this. If I say let hero name be equal to Superman, we've seen this before, okay? I've declared a variable called hero name. I've assigned a value of Superman. So right underneath that code, apologies, I can just log out that value of hero name, okay? So if I save and refresh, we get Superman. Now, because I've declared this variable inside of the root of the document, i.e. not in curly braces, not within a code block, so far we've seen code blocks such as, an if statement or loops, etc. We haven't got the functions yet. But essentially, it has been declared outside of curly braces, so it is in the root of the document, it is essentially a global variable. Okay, so this is a global variable, okay? Now, if I was to come under here and create an if statement, okay, let's hard code it to be true, right? What I can do is I can console.log the value of hero name, okay? So now what's going to happen is we're going to log out Superman twice without any errors, okay? And that is because we've declared and initialized the variable hero name with a value of Superman here, okay? And what we're doing is we're just logging that out to the console, okay? So we're just logging it out to the console. But because this is a global variable declared in the root of the document outside of curly braces such as here, we actually have access to that variable inside of this if statement. So really what this is, let me just comma separate here. Okay, this is the global variable being logged to the console, okay? And here is the global variable being logged to the console from within the if statement. So within the if statement, we still have access to that variable, okay? So we just save and refresh. This is a global variable being logged to the console from the if statement, okay? So the key point here is that even though we've declared the variable in the root of the document, the global variable, we still have access to it both within the root of the document, i.e. outside of curly braces or a code block, and we still have access to it within the if statement. Okay? Awesome. Now, what was to happen if I was actually to create a variable inside of the if statement, okay? And then I try to access that later on in the document. Well, let's have a look, right? If I was to say, let hero name, this time we'll do with Batman, be equal to Batman, okay? I've declared a variable called Batman, and I can log it out of the console, okay? Console.log hero name, okay? This should work for us, right? This will work. Now, this is actually, what we've done here is we've actually created a local variable. And the reason it is a local variable is because it has been declared or defined within a code block, i.e. between this curly brace and that curly brace. So what that means is we only have access to this variable within the code block. We don't have access to it outside of it. So I'll prove this to you. I've declared the variable here, let hero name be equal to Batman, on line 13. And on line 14, I just log it to the console. I say console.log hero name. So what's going to happen? We're just simply going to log out Batman. Okay? Now, watch what happens if I copy this code, okay, and paste it here. So it's the same code. I haven't made any mistakes. What's going to happen is we're actually going to get an error in the console. And that is because hero name has been declared locally within the curly braces, so it exists within the code block. We can access it within the code block, but we don't have access to it outside of the if statement because it has been declared locally. And that is the key difference between a global variable and a local variable. So to prove that to you, if I save and refresh, we get an uncaught reference error, hero name is not defined. And that's because while I've declared the variable here, I've used the let keyword, let hero name be equal to Batman, it only exists locally. So it's a local variable, it exists locally within the curly braces. So I can access it within the curly braces, but outside I can't, because what's happening here is I'm trying to access a local variable globally within the document, okay? I know this is a bit confusing when you first see it, but we're going to learn more about global and local variables. We'll see them now in the next chapter when we get to functions. But the key takeaway is this. For now, just be aware that global and local variables exist. A global variable is one that is declared in the root of the document, i.e. outside of curly braces. So if I declare a global variable, I can still access it within, for example, an if statement or a switch statement or loops, etc. Okay? However, if I declare a variable locally within a code block, i.e. between an opening and closing curly brace, such as in an if statement or whatever the case may be, we don't have access to that variable outside of that code block because it only exists locally. Okay? Can be a bit confusing. Just keep this in the back of your mind. Be very useful to understand when we start working with functions in chapter 3 of this course. So see you in the next tutorial.